I'll never forget the winter of 2018. I was living alone in a small cabin just outside Portland, Oregon, surrounded by dense forest that stretched for miles in every direction. It was the kind of place where you could go days without seeing another human being. And honestly, that's exactly what I wanted. Peace, solitude, a break from the chaos of city life. It was mid-December when the fog rolled in. Not the usual morning mist that burned away by noon, but a thick, suffocating blanket that seemed to seep into everything. It arrived on a Tuesday evening and stayed for 3 days straight, turning the world outside my windows into a gray, impenetrable wall. I couldn't see more than 10 feet in any direction. On the second night, around 11 p.m., I was sitting by my wood stove reading when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps crunching through the dead leaves outside. I froze, book still open in my lap, and listened. The footsteps stopped, then started again. They were circling my cabin. I told myself it was a deer, maybe a bear. But deep down, I knew better. Animals don't walk in perfect circles. Animals don't pause at each window as if looking in, and animals definitely don't breathe the way I heard breathing against my bedroom window that night. Heavy, ragged, almost human, but not quite. I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room with every light on and a baseball bat across my knees, watching the windows. The fog pressed against the glass like something alive, swirling and shifting in patterns that made my eyes hurt. And through it all, those footsteps kept circling, round and round and round. By dawn, the sounds had stopped. I waited until full daylight before going outside. The fog had lifted slightly, enough that I could see maybe 30 feet. I found the footprints immediately. They circled my entire cabin in a perfect loop, and they weren't animal tracks. They were bare human footprints. In December, in near-freezing temperatures. But what made my blood run cold was their size. Easily twice as large as my own feet, with toes that seemed too long, almost claw-like. I should have left right then, packed my bags and driven straight back to the city. But I convinced myself there had to be a rational explanation. Maybe someone was messing with me. Maybe it was some kind of prank. That night, the fog returned, even thicker than before, and so did the footsteps. But this time, they didn't just circle. This time, they stopped at my front door. I heard the door handle rattle, slowly, testing. The wood of the door creaked as if something was pressing its weight against it. I stood in my living room, bat raised, staring at that door, barely breathing. Then I heard it. A voice, whispered, but somehow perfectly clear through the door. Let me in. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even really a voice, more like the memory of words, like someone had carved the sounds directly into my brain. My legs went weak. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but where would I go? Into the forest? Into the fog? I know you hear me, the voice whispered. I've been waiting so long. I stood there for what felt like hours, bat trembling in my hands as that thing whispered through my door. It told me things about myself, private things no one else could know, fears I'd never spoken out loud, dreams I'd had as a child. It knew everything. The sun finally rose, and the voice stopped. I didn't wait for the fog to lift. I threw everything I could grab into my car and drove. I didn't stop driving until I hit the city limits, and even then, I kept checking my rearview mirror, convinced I'd see something following me through the thinning mist. I never went back to that cabin. A month later, I hired someone to collect my remaining belongings. They told me the place looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Cobwebs, dust, no signs of recent habitation. But they also mentioned something strange. They found handprints, dozens of them, on every single window, from the inside, pressed against the glass as if trying to get out. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. Sometimes, on foggy evenings, I hear those footsteps outside my apartment, in the city, slow, deliberate, circling. And last week, I found a single footprint in my bathroom, large, wet, with toes that stretched too long. Whatever followed me from those woods, it's still here, and it's patient. My family moved into an old Victorian house in upstate New York in October 2016. The place was beautiful. High ceilings, original hardwood floors, a wraparound porch that overlooked acres of forest. The previous owners had left in a hurry, which should have been our first warning. But we were so eager to leave our cramped apartment that we ignored the signs. The house came with a basement I was told never to enter. Not by the real estate agent, she never mentioned it. The warning came from the old man who lived in the property next door, about a quarter-mile down the road. He stopped by on our second day there, brought us some vegetables from his garden, and as he was leaving, he paused at the door. "Don't go into the basement after dark," he said. "And if you hear knocking from down there, don't ever, and I mean ever, answer it back." My husband laughed it off. "Small-town superstition," he said. But I noticed how the old man didn't smile when he said it. His eyes were serious, afraid. The first week passed without incident. We unpacked, got settled, enjoyed the peace and quiet. The basement door was in the kitchen, an old wooden thing with a padlock that the previous owners had left in place. We had the key, but never felt the need to go down there. The house had plenty of storage space upstairs. Then came the fog. It rolled in on a Saturday night, thick and gray and heavy with moisture. By Sunday morning, we couldn't see our own porch. The world outside our windows had vanished into a white void. My husband joked that we were trapped in Silent Hill. I didn't find it funny. That's when the knocking started. 3 sharp raps from beneath the kitchen floor. We were having breakfast when we heard it. We both froze, coffee cups halfway to our lips, staring at each other. "Old house settling," my husband said, but his voice was uncertain. 3 more knocks, louder this time, more insistent. I thought about the old man's warning, "Don't answer it back." But my husband, being the practical person he is, walked over to the basement door and called down, "Hello? Is someone there?" The knocking stopped. For about 10 seconds there was absolute silence. Then we heard footsteps on the basement stairs, slow, heavy, climbing up toward the door. We both backed away from the kitchen, watching that door, which was still padlocked shut from the outside. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs and stopped, right on the other side of the door. We could hear breathing now, wet, labored, like someone or something had just run a great distance. Then the door handle began to turn, back and forth, even though the padlock held it secure. The old wood groaned under some tremendous pressure from the other side. "We need to leave," I whispered, "right now." But my husband, stubborn to the core, grabbed a flashlight and approached the door. "There has to be a rational explanation. Maybe an animal got trapped down there. Maybe—" The door slammed outward with such force that the padlock shattered. The door swung open, revealing the darkness beyond. That darkness seemed wrong somehow. Too thick, too black, like it was made of something solid that just happened to look like shadow. And in that darkness, something moved. Something tall. Something that definitely wasn't human. I screamed. My husband dropped the flashlight. We ran, not grabbing coats, not grabbing keys, just ran out the front door into the fog. We ran down our driveway, slipping on the wet gravel, ran down the road toward the neighbor's house. The fog was so thick we could barely see 5 feet ahead, but we didn't stop running until we reached the old man's porch. He opened his door before we could knock, as if he had been expecting us. His face was grim. It followed you, didn't it? We spent the night at his house. He told us about the basement, about the thing that had lived in that house for generations, how it fed on something he couldn't quite explain, fear maybe, or attention, how it had driven away every family that had ever lived there, how the previous owner's teenage son had disappeared into that basement and was never found. It knocks, he explained. It always knocks, and if you answer, if you acknowledge it, it gets stronger. It can cross the threshold. We never went back to that house. Not to live, anyway. We hired movers to pack our things during daylight hours. They said the basement door was closed and locked again when they arrived, padlock intact as if it had never broken. But here's what haunts me. We moved to a new city, 300 miles away. Got an apartment on the 4th floor of a modern building. No basement, no old creaky doors. Safe, we thought. Last month, on a particularly foggy night, my husband woke me at 3 a.m. He was standing by our bedroom door, staring out into our living room. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I listened, and then I heard it. 3 sharp knocks from beneath our floor, from a basement that doesn't exist. We're moving again next week, but I'm starting to think it doesn't matter where we go. We answered the knocking, and whatever was in that basement, it's not done with us yet.
In college, I worked the graveyard shift at a 24-hour gas station just off Highway 88 in Northern California. It was the kind of place that saw maybe 5 customers between midnight and 6 a.m., mostly truckers and the occasional lost tourist. The pay was decent, I could study between customers, and honestly, I liked the solitude. That is, until the night I met the fog walker. It was late November 2019. I'd been working there for about 8 months, long enough to recognize my regular customers and their routines. Around 2:30 in the morning, the fog rolled in. Not unusual for that time of year, but this fog was different, thicker. It didn't drift, it seemed to pulse, like it was breathing. I was restocking cigarettes behind the counter when I noticed someone standing at the gas pumps. I hadn't heard a car pull up, and the bell over the door hadn't chimed. But there they were, a tall figure in what looked like an old overcoat, just standing there in the fog, staring at the store. I watched them through the window for a full minute. They didn't move, didn't pump gas, just stood there, perfectly still, facing the store, facing me. "Can I help you?" I called out, even though I knew they couldn't hear me through the glass. The figure started walking toward the store. Not normal walking. Their movements were wrong somehow. Too smooth, like they were gliding rather than walking, like their feet weren't quite touching the ground. The bell chimed as the door opened, and they stepped inside. Up close, I could see why their movement had seemed so odd. They weren't wearing shoes. Their feet were bare, dirty, and left wet footprints on the linoleum floor. But more disturbing was their face, or lack thereof. The fog seemed to have followed them inside, clinging to their features, obscuring everything except their eyes. And those eyes, they were completely black, no whites, no irises, just endless darkness staring at me from that fog-shrouded face. "Help you?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. Every instinct told me to run, to get away, but I was frozen behind that counter. The figure tilted its head, studying me with those impossible eyes. Then it spoke, and its voice sounded like it came from very far away, distorted and hollow. "I need directions." Where are you trying to go?" I stammered. "Home," it said. "I've been lost for so very long. Can you tell me how to get home?" Something about the way it asked made my skin crawl. It wasn't a genuine question. It felt like a test, like the wrong answer would have consequences I didn't want to imagine. I'm not from around here," I lied. "I don't really know the area that well." The figure stood there silent for what felt like an eternity. Then it leaned forward, closer to the counter, and the fog around its face swirled, revealing a mouth that was smiling, but it wasn't a human smile. The mouth stretched too wide, with too many teeth, all of them sharp and wrong. "Liar," it whispered. "You've lived here your whole life. You know every road, every path, every shortcut through the woods." My blood went cold. How could they know that? I'd never seen this person before in my life. "Please leave," I managed to say. "I can't help you." The creature wearing human shape straightened up and said, "But I can help you. I can show you things, teach you secrets that the fog whispers to those who listen. All you have to do is invite me behind the counter. Let me stand beside you, just for a little while." "No." The word came out stronger than I felt. The creature's smile vanished, its eyes narrowed. "Then I'll wait," it said. "I'm very patient. I've waited this long." It turned and glided back out into the fog. The bell chimed. The door closed, and just like that, I was alone again. But not really alone. I could see it out there, standing at the edge of the parking lot, perfectly still, watching the store, watching me. It stood there for the next 3.5 hours, didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. I called my manager, but my phone had no signal. I tried the store phone, but every call went to static. I was trapped there, alone with that thing staring at me from the fog. As soon as my shift ended at 6 a.m. and my replacement arrived, I ran to my car. The thing was gone. The fog had lifted with the sunrise. But when I got to my car, I found something that made me want to scream. There were wet footprints circling my vehicle. Dozens of them. That thing had spent the night walking around my car over and over, like a predator circling its prey. I quit that job the same day. But quitting didn't help.
because now, whenever there's fog, I see it, standing at the end of my street, outside my apartment building, in the parking lot of my new job, always watching, always waiting. The fog walker followed me home that night, and it's never left. 2 weeks ago, I found wet footprints in my apartment, leading from my front door to my bedroom, to the side of my bed where I sleep, and written in the condensation on my bathroom mirror was a single word: home. I don't know what it wants. I don't know why it chose me, but I know that one foggy night I'm going to wake up and find it standing at the foot of my bed, smiling that too wide smile, finally ready to show me what it means when it says it's going home. And I'm terrified that when that night comes, I'll be going with it.